Professor Park stood at the entrance of the large classroom. He took a deep breath before pushing open the door. 50 pairs of alien eyes immediately turned to look at him. Some blinked multiple times, others changed color. A few students in the back row extended sensory organs to get a better look. This was his first day teaching at the Galactic Academy of Xenology. As the first human professor at this prestigious institution, Park knew he represented all of Earth. "Good morning," he said, placing his materials on the desk. "I am Professor Park, your instructor for comparative military history." A ripple of movement passed through the class. Several students shifted away slightly. One small green student, near the front, actually produced a faint smell of fear. Park had expected this reaction. Humans were classified as Deathworlders throughout the galaxy. Species from gentle planets often found humans disturbing, creatures who evolved on a world that should have killed them. "I understand many of you have questions about humans," Park continued calmly. "That's natural. Throughout this course, we will examine why different species approach conflict differently." In the third row, a blue-skinned student with 4 eyes watched intently. This was Tyke, a Vildaran scholar who had specifically requested this class, despite warnings from his advisors. "Is it true humans fight each other for entertainment?" called out a student with tentacles. Park smiled. "We have competitive sports, yes. Some involve physical contact." More whispers spread through the room. Tyke made notes on his tablet. "Our first lesson begins with understanding environments," Park explained. He activated the room's display system, showing Earth's diverse landscapes. "My planet features extreme weather, thousands of predator species, and natural disasters. These shaped our approach to survival." A student in the back raised a limb. "Professor, is it true humans continue fighting even after suffering major losses? Our history teaches that rational species retreat when outmatched." "An excellent question," Park replied. "On Earth, persistence despite setbacks is often necessary for survival. Sometimes retreating means death." Tyke raised his hand next. "But that defies logical risk assessment. Why would a species evolve to continue fighting when probability of success diminishes?" Park looked directly at Tyke. "Because sometimes improbable victory is still possible, and sometimes the alternative is worse than fighting." After class, Tyke approached the professor's desk while other students hurried away, still uncomfortable with the human presence. "Professor Park, I am Tyke. Your perspective is difficult for me to understand. My species resolves conflicts through logical debate and clear dominance displays. The idea of physical contest with uncertain outcomes seems inefficient." Park nodded. "Different evolutionary paths lead to different solutions. Tell me, Tyke, what predators exist on your homeworld?" "None that threaten Veldarans. We developed intelligence before most other species on our planet." "That explains much," Park said. "On Earth, humans were prey animals first. We became predators to survive. This shapes everything about our approach to conflict." The academy bell sounded, signaling the end of the session. Park gathered his materials and looked at Tyke. "Tomorrow we'll discuss why garden world species and Deathworlders view risk so differently." Over the next few days, Professor Park's class became the most discussed on campus. Some students dropped the course, uncomfortable with human concepts of warfare. Others joined, curious about these strange Deathworlders. Tyke remained, though he struggled with human military concepts. Each night he researched Earth history, becoming increasingly disturbed by human conflicts. 1 week into the course, Professor Park announced a special project. "Each of you will analyze how your species approaches conflict, compared to 3 others, including humans. This requires understanding perspectives very different from your own." After class, Park noticed Tyke lingering again. "Something troubling you?" Park asked. "I've been studying your Earth wars," Tyke replied. "The violence seems excessive." Park nodded slowly. "To you it would, just as your planet's peaceful history seems impossible to us." "Can species so different ever truly understand each other?" Tyke asked. "That's why this academy exists," Park said, "and why I'm here. Understanding begins with accepting differences without judgment. As Tyke left, Professor Park watched the young Veldaran with interest. Of all his students, Tyke seemed most determined to understand humans, despite his clear discomfort. Park smiled slightly. The semester would challenge all of them, himself included. Teaching Garden World species about Deathworld survival might be the greatest challenge of his career. But bridging such differences was the first step toward true galactic cooperation. And if anyone could learn to see beyond their evolutionary biases, Park believed it might be students like Tyke. The classroom fell silent as Professor Park displayed images of Earth's most dangerous predators on the large screen. Lions bringing down zebras, sharks attacking seals, bears fighting wolves. These are just a few of the hundreds of predator species humans evolved alongside, Professor Park explained. Now imagine developing intelligence while being hunted by creatures like these. Tyke watched from his seat, 4 eyes blinking rapidly. Unlike his home world with its peaceful gardens and gentle weather, Earth seemed like a nightmare. No wonder humans approached conflict differently. Garden worlds develop warfare around territory and resources, Professor Park continued. But Deathworlders like humans fight first for survival, against predators, harsh environments, and each other. A student in the front raised a tentacle. But Professor, once you develop technology, surely this pressure ended. Technology changed our methods, not our mindset, Park answered. 10,000 years is too short to erase millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Tyke raised his hand next. Your casualty acceptance rates are completely irrational by galactic standards. Professor Park nodded. To Garden World species, yes, but consider when a predator attacks, retreating at first injury often means being caught and killed. Sometimes fighting despite injury is the only survival option. After class, Tyke met with his study group in the Academy's garden dome. His classmate Jin sat nearby, her 6 legs folded neatly beneath her silvery body. I don't understand why we need to study human warfare, Jin complained. Their methods have no application to civilized species. Professor Park says understanding different approaches helps us recognize our own biases, Tyke replied, though he secretly shared some of Jin's concerns. That evening, Tyke stayed late in the library, reviewing human military history. The more he studied, the more disturbed he became. Humans didn't just fight until dominance was established. They fought until victory, regardless of cost. The next morning, Professor Park introduced a new concept. Today we discuss asymmetric warfare, he said. When facing a stronger opponent, humans often refuse direct confrontation, instead targeting weaknesses through unconventional means. A crystalline student vibrated in confusion. But honor dictates facing opponents directly. On Garden Worlds, perhaps, Park replied. On Deathworlds, survival dictates adapting to overcome advantages. Lions are stronger than humans, but humans learn to use tools and traps instead of matching strength directly. Tyke raised his hand. Is this why humans value deception in warfare? My research shows you deliberately mislead opponents about your capabilities and intentions. Several students shifted uncomfortably at this statement. Correct, Park said. In nature, many Earth creatures use camouflage or mimicry to survive. Humans applied these principles to warfare. We call it tactical deception. After class, Professor Park noticed Tyke lingering again. Something troubling you? He asked. I've been researching human conflicts, Tyke admitted. The intensity disturbs me. In one war, you continued fighting despite millions of casualties. Park nodded gravely. World War II. Yes, that conflict shaped much of our modern thinking. My species would have negotiated peace after the first major losses, Tyke said. Sometimes peace isn't offered, Park replied quietly. Sometimes surrendering means extinction. Their conversation was interrupted by a news alert on the Academy's communication system. A diplomatic incident had occurred at the Galactic Council. Human representatives had walked out after being insulted by the Zenith delegation. Whispers spread through the halls. Some students cast wary glances at Professor Park. The next day, tension filled the classroom. Park addressed it directly. You've all heard about yesterday's incident, he said. This presents an opportunity to discuss how different species interpret confrontation. To humans, the Zenith statement questioned our right to exist in galactic society. But they merely suggested Deathworlders lack refinement, said Jin. To Garden World species, this might seem minor, Park explained. To humans who fought countless threats to survive, such statements echo existential challenges. Our response, leaving rather than escalating, shows how we've evolved diplomatically. Tyke considered this perspective. Perhaps humans weren't simply aggressive. They responded strongly to perceived threats because of their evolutionary history. At the end of class, Professor Park made an announcement that silenced the room. Next week, we will take a field trip to observe human military training exercises on the Academy's satellite station. You'll witness physical training, tactical exercises, and weapons demonstrations firsthand. Nervous murmurs spread through the class. Many students had never seen humans in combat scenarios before. As they filed out, Tyke approached Professor Park again. "Will it be dangerous?" he asked. "All precautions will be taken," Park assured him. "But understanding requires more than theory. You need to see why humans train as we do." Tyke nodded, both anxious and curious about witnessing Deathworlders in their element. Despite his reservations about human warfare, he was beginning to understand that their approach wasn't simply violent, it was adapted to survive conditions his species had never faced. The transport shuttle docked at the military training station orbiting the Academy planet. Professor Park led his nervous students down the ramp where Lieutenant Han waited to greet them. "Welcome to Training Station Alpha," Lieutenant Han said with a crisp bow. "Today you'll observe how humans prepare for combat situations." Tyke stayed, close to Professor Park, all four eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. The station hummed with activity. Human soldiers moved with purpose through the corridors, their bodies compact and muscular compared to most galactic species. "First, we'll observe basic physical conditioning," Lieutenant Han explained, leading them to an observation deck. Below, 20 human soldiers ran an obstacle course. They climbed walls, swung across gaps, crawled under electrified wires, and carried heavy packs. Many were sweating and breathing hard. Some had minor cuts and bruises. "Why are they bleeding during practice?" whispered Jin, her silvery body trembling slightly. "This isn't even real combat." "Training must approximate real conditions," Lieutenant Han explained, overhearing the comment. "If soldiers don't experience discomfort during practice, they won't. Be prepared for actual combat." Tyke watched in fascination as one soldier fell from a climbing wall, quickly got up despite obvious pain, and immediately tried again. "Notice how they continued despite failure," Professor Park pointed out. "This builds psychological resilience along with physical strength." Next, they observed team exercises. Squads of soldiers moved through simulated urban environments, communicating with hand signals and working together to secure objectives while instructor-controlled drones fired harmless but painful light projectiles at them. "They're protecting each other," Tyke noted with surprise. "Covering teammates even at risk to themselves. Unit cohesion is fundamental to human warfare," Professor Park explained. "Humans fight harder for their companions than for themselves." "Lieutenant," Han led them to a weapons demonstration area. "Now we'll show you standard infantry equipment." Many students moved back nervously as trainers displayed various weapons. Even though these were training models, the concept disturbed species from peaceful worlds. "These tools evolved from hunting equipment," Lieutenant Han explained. "Our ancestors adapted predator hunting techniques for self-defense." Tyke studied everything with intense interest despite his discomfort. He began to see connections between Earth's dangerous environment and human approaches to conflict. After lunch in the station's mess hall, Lieutenant Han announced, "Now we'll demonstrate tactical flexibility, perhaps the most important human combat principle." The students watched as a training scenario unfolded. A squad was given a mission to capture an objective, but found their primary route blocked. Without hesitation, they split into smaller teams, created a diversion, and approached from multiple directions. "Notice how quickly they adapt when plans fail," Professor Park pointed out. No rigid formations or procedures when circumstances change. Like prey animals evading predators, Tyke realized aloud. Exactly. Professor Park nodded, approvingly. And like predators tracking prey, we learned from both. The final demonstration was scheduled in the station's largest training area, a massive space with variable terrain. Lieutenant Han led them to an elevated observation platform. This exercise demonstrates combined arms tactics, he explained, as vehicles, foot soldiers, and support units took positions. The demonstration began with impressive coordination between different units, but suddenly a loud boom echoed through the chamber. Part of the ceiling structure had failed. Structural integrity compromised. An alarm blared. Evacuation required. A large metal support beam crashed down near the observation platform. The deck tilted sharply. Several students lost their footing and slid toward the edge. Without hesitation, Professor Park lunged forward, grabbing Tyke and Jin before they could fall 20 meters to the training floor below. Lieutenant Han and other human personnel immediately formed a human chain, pulling students to safety. When the emergency stabilizers engaged, everyone gathered in the evacuation area. Despite minor injuries, not a single student had been seriously hurt. Are you all right? Professor Park asked Tyke, who was still shaking. You risked yourself for us, Tyke said wonderingly. Why? Protection of non-combatants is fundamental to modern human warfare, Professor Park explained while medical personnel checked his injured shoulder. Despite what you've heard about humans, we don't glorify death or violence. We respect their power and work to prevent them. As they boarded the emergency shuttle to return to the academy, Tyke sat quietly, processing what he had witnessed. The humans had reacted instantly to danger, not with panic but with coordinated action that prioritized saving others. I think I'm beginning to understand, he told Professor Park. Your species doesn't train for war because you love fighting. No, Professor Park agreed. We train because we understand the cost of being unprepared. Back at the academy, news of the training station accident spread quickly. Many students viewed the human response with new respect. Tyke found himself explaining to others what he had witnessed, how the humans had protected them without hesitation. That night, Tyke recorded in his study journal, perhaps what seems like aggression in humans is actually a highly developed protective instinct. They prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The Academy's warning alarms blared through the Xenology department. Tyke looked up from his studies in confusion. The emergency lights pulsed with an urgent purple glow, the signal for a security breach. All students remain in classrooms, Gus, announced the automated system. This is not a drill. Professor Park entered the room quickly, closing and sealing the door behind him. His face showed concern but remained controlled. The Academy is under attack, he informed the class calmly. A group calling themselves Purity Front has seized the main security hub and locked down our wing. Frightened murmurs spread through the classroom. The Purity Front was known across the galaxy as an extremist group that opposed integration of different species, especially humans and other Deathworlders. Communications are blocked, Professor Park continued, and the emergency systems have been overridden. Tyke felt a chill pass through his body. What do they want? A message flashed across all screens in the room. Deathworlders out of Galactic Education. Surrender the human. Professor Park read the message silently. They appear to want me, he said simply. Jin's silvery body trembled. We should comply. They'll release us once they have what they want. That's what they want you to believe, Professor Park said. But extremists rarely keep their promises. A loud explosion shook the building. Through the classroom windows, they could see armed figures moving through the corridor, checking rooms systematically. They've isolated this section, Professor Park assessed quickly. Help won't reach us for hours. What do we do? Asked a frightened student. Professor Park looked around the room at his students, garden world species who had never faced real danger before. We need to think like humans now. Tyke moved closer. Like the training exercise, adapt and overcome? Exactly, Professor Park nodded. They expect garden world responses, hiding, negotiating, or surrendering. They don't expect resistance. The professor quickly divided the class into teams. Taik, you and Jin check what resources we have in the lab storage. Minho, use your species' natural abilities to monitor the corridors. Su, your electromagnetic sensitivity might help us communicate without using networks. Within minutes, they had cataloged their assets and limitations. The attackers were moving methodically, capturing students and faculty as they went. They're not expecting organized resistance, Professor Park explained as they gathered in a circle. That gives us an advantage. Remember what we studied about asymmetric warfare? Target weaknesses rather than strengths, Tyke recalled, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. And use the environment, added Jin, surprising herself with her recollection. Professor Park smiled. You've been paying attention. Under the professor's guidance, they developed a plan. Tyke would lead the distraction team using sound amplification equipment from the linguistics lab to make their numbers seem larger. Jin's group would work on disabling the power systems to specific sections, creating confusion. What about weapons? Asked Minho nervously. We use what we have, Professor Park explained, gathering chemicals from the biology lab. Non-lethal, deterrence only. Our goal is containment until help arrives, not causing harm. When 3 attackers approached their classroom, Sue used her electromagnetic sense to warn the others. Rather than hiding, they executed their plan. As the door opened, chemical smoke filled the corridor, and speakers blasted recorded sounds from multiple directions. In the confusion, Professor Park and Tyke's team moved swiftly, using simple physics. Rather than force, tripping mechanisms, pressure points, and leverage to disarm and restrain the surprised attackers. They expected fear, not strategy, Professor Park noted as they secured the captives. Over the next hour, they systematically created distractions throughout their section, separating the attackers and using similar tactics to neutralize them, one by one. When they reached the department's central control room, they found the Purity Front leader surprised by their approach from an unexpected direction. Impossible, he sputtered as Tyke and Jin led the final push. Garden Worlders don't fight. We learn from humans, Tyke replied simply. After securing all attackers, they re-established communications with Academy security. When the response team finally broke through the barricades, they found an unexpected scene. The student-professor team had successfully contained all 15 attackers without serious injuries to either side. Later, as medical teams treated minor injuries, the Academy director approached Professor Park and his students. You could have hidden until help arrived, the director said, amazement in her voice. That would have been the Garden World approach, Professor Park replied. But sometimes the best defense is a carefully planned response. Take stood nearby, still processing what had happened. I understand now, he told Professor Park. Humans don't win by being strongest or most aggressive. No, the professor agreed. We win by adapting fastest. As security teams escorted the Corridom last attackers away, Tyke realized something important had changed. He no longer saw human approaches to conflict as frightening or primitive. He saw them as necessary adaptations to a dangerous universe, adaptations that had just saved all their lives. The grand lecture hall of the Galactic Academy was filled to capacity. 2 weeks after the attack, the Academy had organized a special event to honor the Xenology class that had defended themselves against the Purity Front extremists. Tyke stood at the podium, his blue skin slightly darker with nervousness. All 4 of his eyes blinked rapidly as he faced the crowd of students, professors, and galactic diplomats. Before meeting Professor Park, I believed humans were dangerous, he began. I was not wrong. They are dangerous, but not in the way I thought. The audience listened silently. In the front row, Professor Park watched with quiet pride. Garden World species misunderstand humans, Tyke continued. We see their readiness for conflict as love of violence. We see their training as aggression. This is like judging a plant for growing thorns on a world with many plant eaters. Tyke activated the display behind him, showing images of Earth's varied environments. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them daily. Predators hunted them. Weather destroyed their homes. Disease attacked their bodies. Yet they survived by adapting. by planning for the worst while working toward peace. Jin sat in the second row, her silvery body reflecting the lights. She nodded encouragingly at Taek. When the attackers came, they expected us to hide or surrender, because that is what Garden World species do. They did not expect us to use human tactics to assess resources, create opportunities, and work together. The Academy Director rose next, presenting special commendations to each student. When she reached Tech, she paused. Your understanding of human defensive strategies saved many lives, she acknowledged. The Academy is establishing a new cross-species tactical studies program based on your experience. After the ceremony, students from other departments approached the Xenology class with questions. Many who had avoided humans now showed interest in understanding Deathworlder perspectives. In the following days, news spread throughout the galactic community. Other education centers requested information about Professor Park's teaching methods. Several students announced interest in human-alien joint military exchange programs. A week later, Taek sat with Professor Park in the Academy garden. Spring, flowers bloomed around them, so different from the harsh beauty of Earth plants. I received an offer to join Earth's diplomatic corps after graduation, Taek said. They want perspectives from Garden World species who understand human thinking. Professor Park smiled. You would be excellent. You've learned something many species never grasp, that different evolutionary paths create different but equally valid approaches to survival. What I still don't understand, Taek admitted, is how humans maintain hope despite knowing how dangerous the universe is. Garden Worlders fear what we don't understand, but humans face it directly. That's exactly why we maintain hope, Professor Park explained. When you face your fears instead of avoiding them, you learn they rarely match your imagination. Preparation reduces fear. Later that evening, Professor Park held the final class session of the semester. The room felt different now. Students who once kept distance from him now sat closer. Questions flowed freely. For your final assignment, Professor Park announced, I asked you to compare your species' approach to conflict with others. Instead, I'd like you to explain what you personally learned from our experiences together. The next day, Taek submitted his paper. The title was simple: The Courage to Face Reality. What Garden Worlds Can Learn from Deathworlders. In it, he wrote, The greatest error in understanding humans is assuming their readiness for conflict equals eagerness for it. In truth, humans prepare so thoroughly precisely because they value peace and life so deeply. At graduation ceremony, the following month, Taek was selected to give the student address. Looking out at the diverse gathering of species, he felt a new sense of purpose. Before this year, I believed different species could never truly understand each other, he began. Deathworlders and Garden Worlders seemed too different. But now I understand that these differences are our greatest strength when we learn from each other. In the audience, Professor Park watched his former student with quiet satisfaction. The class had begun with students fearing humans. It ended with them understanding that different evolutionary paths led to different strengths, all necessary in a complex galaxy. After the ceremony, Taek approached Professor Park one last time before departing for Earth. You changed our perspective, he said gratefully. No, Professor Park smiled. You changed your own when you stopped seeing differences as threats and started seeing them as adaptations. As Taek boarded the transport to Earth, he carried with him not just academic knowledge but a deeper understanding that throughout the galaxy life found different ways to survive, and respecting those differences was the first step toward true cooperation.